So, it's Sunday night. I have yet to fix these streetlights, but I'm okay. I don't see any coyotes tonight. Um, Work was pretty intense, but I feel like I was able to do what they were asking. Um, and that they appreciated what I do. Um, am I gonna get any kind of benefit from that? Doubtful, but we'll see. So, anyways, I went in, I did my job. It was pretty intense, and I left, and I was just feeling really stressed. And I thought, you know what, I need to let this go because I do not want to be the person who just walks around beaten down and negative all the time. And so many of our long-term employees are like that, and rightly so sometimes. It's very difficult, and there's not a lot of appreciation sometimes. And we're sure not getting rich either. So what can I do here? There's mud all over this sidewalk. I hope, okay, it's dry enough I can walk on it. I didn't want to let that happen to me. Once I slipped in some mud, I just got saturated, and I basically was standing out in front of the house, running the hose all over myself, trying to get it all off before I went in the house. It was pretty bad. So, anyways, I don't want to be that person. I thought, well, you know what? I have this playlist I made. I call it Hardcore Praise, and I thought, I'm going to listen to that. And I was playing it. I have a safety vest. You can't really see it, but well, you'll see it when I go in the light, I think. But it has pockets, so I put here it is. So I put my cell phone in the pocket, and I was playing it on the speaker, and it was basically Kirk Franklin, Little Mary Mary, that kind of stuff. And you can look it up on YouTube Music if you want. I'm not going to get any money or anything, but you might enjoy it. I should warn you, I do have a little bit of heavy metal in there too. Testament of Steel, one thing they like to do is to take old-time hymns and set it to heavy metal, which I really like. That's one of my favorite presentations, actually. So, I would love to hear what they could do with Bringing in the Sheaves. So anyways, I was listening, and about 3 songs in, I'm almost all the way across the parking lot. I realized I feel so much better. I just, that to quote another song, I left it in the water, I just left it at the door when I walked out, and I'm like, you know what? Tonight, I feel like I left work correctly for the first time in my life. It was very, very interesting. And I was mostly able to just leave it. So that's good. I also was smart enough to document what I did. So, if there's any questions tomorrow, I've got proof. So, and I have a nice little treat at home. I sell those pastries I have. And my weight is still okay. So I think it's very interesting. Everybody wants to know how I'm losing the weight. And the only thing I can really conclude between us is that, God fixed my head. And I'm just not putting it in my mouth. I don't think I'm eating half as much as I used to. And what I do eat is high quality food. Like tonight for dinner, I had 2 little thin skillet steaks with a quinoa pilaf, and the quinoa had a ton of vegetables in it, and that was good. I was happy with that. So I had a protein shake for breakfast, and that was pretty much it for the whole day. So, and I think, according to my tracker, probably like 800 calories or so just in activity. And then the baseline, I think, is about 1,000. So, yeah, and I ate less than that, I think. So, anyway, I feel good about that. I feel hopeful, and I feel like I can keep it off, which is even more important. And that's just one major reason I'm just not in a hurry to get involved with anybody, because I'm not as scared as I was, but I am deeply reluctant to end up with another abuser. And that's not going to happen. And I'm going to take steps to make sure it doesn't happen, like a prenup and things like that, so that if things don't work out, he doesn't get the house, or any part of the house. And, I just don't feel like God wants me to be involved right now, because, for one, I'm working some abusive hours. I leave the house at 10. I get home at midnight. Most days I do not get 8 hours of sleep. And I wouldn't want to see someone I love doing that. But I feel like time is short. And I'll give you an example. I was at my bus stop to go home, the first one outside the store. There is a homeless guy who lives near the store, and he is always smoking a pipe. And it was really eating at me. What exactly is he smoking? It's not weed, it's not tobacco, because he's close enough I would smell it. What the heck is the guy smoking? And the bus pulled up, and I got on, and it's a black guy, youngish, and one I've had off and on for years. And I said, I have a really strange question for you. And there were, a lot of other people on the bus. And I sat down on the passenger side. There was a guy sitting on the driver's side behind the driver. And he said, oh, what's that? And I said, well, that guy over there. And, he's like, who? And I described him a little. And the guy across from me nodded. And I said, what is it that he's smoking? And he's like, what? I said, is it crack? Is it something else? I said, it's just been bothering me. I've been, basically on this guy's peripheral for years. And I don't even know what he's addicted to. And the driver just laughed and said, I don't know. And the guy across from me said, it's meth. And he spoke with a great deal of authority. And I looked at him, I said, oh, thank you. And I gave him a gospel packet, and he thanked me, and he put it in his backpack. And then a little later, he got off at the homeless encampment. And I realized he personally knows that this guy is addicted to meth. I thought, that is very interesting. And he took a packet, scripture booklet, New Testament with Psalms and Proverbs, handwritten note, I'm praying for you daily, a good amount of candy, and a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, and everybody's crazy for those things. So, I'm like, okay, at least I know now. I'm going to read up a little, I think, on meth addiction, just so I know what I'm dealing with. I'm just the type of person I always want to know that kind of thing. There's Mr. Happy Cat. But he hissed his body on more than one occasion, so that's a big dog over there. Ooh, I'm glad he's going in the house. Okay, so, anyway, so, I like to know what it is in my own life, too. If I have a problem, the first thing I'm going to do is start doing research on it. So, and, sometimes you get better information than others. but the AI stuff isn't bad. So, he got a package, and I feel good about that, and I'm going to be praying for him and everybody else at that encampment, because I'm sure they're all in bondage to some addiction or another. And I think that's one reason God allowed me to be with Ron, is that so I could see firsthand just it's not politically correct, but the absolute enslavement to the drug, whatever it is, that the life is completely controlled by the drug, and how to get more drug, and just and I can never ever forget. I actually signed Ron up for the TV program on A&E, Intervention. And they were very interested because it's the kind of story they like, where here's a good guy run over by a car and now he's got a problem. That's the kind of story they like. And they had me go through a process, and they eventually determined that it wouldn't be a good fit. And I think a big part of it was that Ron was not willing to admit he was an alcoholic. And the other part was I did not have a lot of support if I did leave him. So, because I was working for him. And, it was just, so. Anyways, and years later, Ron and I were arguing about, and they said, for this, you need to keep it completely confidential what you're doing. And I did. He never knew. And he had a good friend who would have blabbed, or he would have used it as a lever on me to get me to give him favors. So I didn't tell him either. And you know who you are if you're watching this. And I was very angry, and I said, hey, you have such a big problem that even the TV show Intervention thought you had a problem. And he's like, what? And I said, yeah, I was trying to sign you up. And he's like, you did what? And I said, yeah. And he's like, well, what happened? Because you never did one. And I said, well, they just decided it wasn't going to work. I said, but, the point is they believed you had a problem too. And he said, so what were you going to do? And I said, at the end of it? He said, yeah. I said, well, if it came to it, I said I was going to tell you that either you give up the alcohol or I was going to walk out. And he said, oh, I would have chose the alcohol. Just very matter of fact, I'm like, what? You going to choose alcohol over the woman who stood by you when you got run over by a pickup truck? And he said, yeah. I'm like, wow. Okay. Frozen food has to go in the freezer. So I have lived with that personally for 29 years. So I can understand a little of what it's like to be on the outside of that. But, and it's very interesting that God has me work with a percentage of people who do have an addiction. Anyways, that is it for now.